The Ten Tails has always been a scary entity, having the power to reshape the land itself, create cataclysms, and even displaying chakra levels comparable to the size of a small planet. That is no simple feat, but what's crazy about this is that this Ten Tails isn't even the strongest of its kind. You see, Boruto's manga introduced a new Ten Tails, referred to as a juvenile, and there's a reason for that. But what's most important is that this Ten Tails was later able to create entities rivaling the power of characters stronger than Jigen, the same Jigen who far surpassed the power of Kaguya Otsutsuki, the same Kaguya who merged with the Ten Tails from the original series. So if the Ten Tails in Boruto's manga is considered a juvenile tail beast, why is it seemingly more powerful than Kaguya's mature Ten Tails? Well, the answer to that question is a bit more complex, because the Ten Tails in Boruto isn't necessarily more powerful than the original, but there's a component that makes the Shinjus it's able to produce a tad bit overpowered. You see, the basic concept of how the Ten Tails acquires power is very simple. An Otsutsuki travels to a planet, plants a Ten Tail seedling, which then transforms into a divine tree after consuming an Otsutsuki. It then spreads its roots across said planet, absorbing all existing life forms, including the natural energy of the planet itself. This is very important to note because the quality of said energy determines the potency of the chakra fruit the Ten Tails produces, which also means that it determines how strong that Ten Tails becomes. So in the context of the original Ten Tails, it was able to consume an Otsutsuki and absorb enough energy from the planet to form a chakra fruit. It then later merged with Kaguya herself before being divided into the 9 Biju by Hagoromo. This means that not only does the Ten Tails in the latter half of Shippuden possess the power of the sacrifice Otsutsuki and the planet itself, but it also possesses the power of Kaguya. Mind you, at this point in the series, it was already emitting power scaling to the size of a small planet, and that's without the power of the 9 and 8 Tails that resided within Naruto, the 4th Hokage, and Killer Bee. This is the same 9 Tails that eclipsed the power of all the other Bijus combined, while only having half of its original power. And you'd think that it didn't get any stronger than this, but it then went on to gain half of the 9 Tails and a huge portion of the 8 Tails, and even gathered more energy from the planet itself and its inhabitants through infinite Tsukunomi. So by the end of Naruto, the Ten Tails was immensely overpowered, but at the same time the characters who possessed the power of the Ten Tails weren't, well, at least in comparison to Boruto characters. You see, it is widely accepted that Fused Momoshiki scales above Kaguya, and the narrative portrays that to be the case as well. Now we can argue the case of Base Momoshiki and Kinshiki given their showing, which I think is a bit more arguable on an individual basis, but that's not really relevant because you have characters such as Jigen and Ishiki who far surpasses both of them in feats and narrative implications. So suffice to say that if a character surpasses Jigen, for example, they must also surpass Kaguya, thus also surpassing the Ten Tails Kaguya possessed. This then leads us into the Shinjus that were introduced in Chapter 4 of Boruto 2 Blue Vortex. These beings were formed after the Claw Grimes code created using the body of the Ten Tails started to devour non-Otsutsukis, thus turning into failed mini-divine trees per se. This allowed them to pretty much hijack the powers and likeness of the person they devoured, along with certain key characteristics. Now you'd assume that these guys would be relatively powerful, but not so much, given the fact that the Ten Tails they receive their power from is considered a juvenile. And the reason why that's the case is because it hasn't consumed an Otsutsuki, which means that it hasn't evolved into a divine tree, which also means that it hasn't absorbed the life force of a planet. All the things Kaguya's Ten Tails did twice. So it was a bit surprising when these entities were able to go toe-to-toe with Boruto himself. Mind you, Boruto scales greatly above Jigen while in base. That's because he was able to bully No Limiter Code, who's also stated to have greatly surpassed Jigen's combat power back in the original manga. Now, it's widely debated as to whether Code surpasses Ishiki Otsutsuki as well, which would also then get Boruto above Ishiki levels of power. The issue with this is that the manga made it a point to say that the cyborgs surpassed Jigen, not Ishiki, multiple times. And though one could argue that they did that because Ishiki wasn't a thing as yet, so the benchmark for the power system was Jigen at that time. That still doesn't explain why post Jigen and Ishiki, the writers still had Shikamaru saying that Code's power should still be below Ishiki Otsutsuki. Now there's no other purpose for this comment aside from the author reinforcing that Ishiki hasn't been surpassed. Because from a storytelling perspective, the only other purpose this could have served was to prove him wrong by having Code show that he isn't below Ishiki. But that hasn't happened. In fact, the next time we saw him, he was getting bodied by base Boruto, and just before that, he got bodied by another cyborg stated to be greatly above Jigen, not Ishiki. So while I don't really care either way, he could be stronger than Ishiki, which would upscale Boruto as well, but the feats and statements so far doesn't back up that notion as of now. So that aside, the main point is that Boruto surpasses Jigen by beating an above Jigen level character. So this also simply means that when you have the bug Shinju tagging Boruto through multiple structures before he could dodge, tanking his lightning release, forcing him to escape using FTG, and even asking Code for assistance, it obviously means that these Shinjus scale above Jigen as well. Mind you, these are the feats from just the bug Shinju, who stems from a normal dude with no powers. So just imagine Hidari, who stems from Sasuke Uchiha, the Sasuke, and even Jura, the literal embodiment of the Ten Tails itself. I mean, you don't have to imagine because you've seen Hidari cancel out Boruto's Rasengan on a good day, something you wouldn't be able to accomplish without some level of relativity. Then you have Jura himself, who two-piece Karma Kawaki, no diff Himawari, and one-shot Boruto himself. So it's pretty clear where these characters scale in power. But why? Well, it's a combination of a few factors. You see, as noted by Boruto in chapter 6 of TBV, there's a strong possibility that Code's chakra is affecting them via the Cloud Grime. He also went on to say that Code may not be an Otsutsuki himself, but he did get a Karma Seal from Ishiki, which is a lump of Otsutsuki essence. So the Karma Seal having some effect wouldn't be a surprise. So two things were confirmed here. One is that the Cloud Grimes, and by virtue the Ten Tails and the Shinju, are indeed affected by Code's chakra and Ishiki's essence from Karma. This is very important because, for one, Code is confirmed to have been implanted with the cells of Shibai Otsutsuki in chapter 13. This came in the form of Kashin Koji revealing that each member of Kara who were given enhanced modifications by Amado received transplants of Shibai's cells. And as a result, Code manifested Claw Marks, Daemon received Reflection, and Ada awakened Omnipotence. All of these abilities being Shibai's own Shinjutsu. Now, it didn't just give them abilities, but also increased their power levels, which is why you had characters like Delta keeping up with Six Paths Naruto and Daemon folding unlimited Code. This also indicates that the power wasn't distributed equally, since some received more power than the others. And as we know, Code had limiters placed on him because his power surpassed Jigen, which means that the power that became a part of the new Shinjus also surpassed Jigen. Now, it doesn't end there because it also states that they were affected by Ishiki Otsutsuki's essence within Code's karma. And what does Ishiki's karma provide Code? Well, that's raw power. So the power from Ishiki's karma, along with Code's own power that came from Shibai's cells, heavily contributed to the strength of the new Shinjus. Which is crazy, by the way, since only one of those power sources would have been enough to surpass the likes of Kaguya, even while she was merged with the original Ten Tails. Though it doesn't end there because there is another component. You see, as stated in Boruto chapter 14, each one reflects the chakra of the person devoured by the Ten Tails and turned into a tree. This simply means that they also receive power from the individuals that were devoured, which means that whatever Sasuke's power level was at the moment of consumption also contributed to the strength of the Shinju. Now, it's not clear if the power is evenly spread to every single Shinju, or if it's concentrated in the Shinju who takes the form of the devoured individual. Either way, this power they're able to take from through the consumption of that person's chakra. So in a sense, the Ten Tails in Boruto by itself isn't necessarily stronger than the one from Shippuden. On a mechanic level, that just wouldn't make sense. It is a juvenile Ten Tails that hasn't consumed an Otsutsuki and hasn't fed on the power of a planet. So the real reason why the Shinjus that were created from the body of this Ten Tails are so overpowered is more so due to the circumstances behind its evolution, which would be the mixture of Ishiki's chakra from Code's karma, Shibai's power within Code's body, and even the chakra of the consumed individuals. Now, it's also important to know that these power sources being a part of these evolved entities doesn't automatically make them equal to the person the power stems from. So Shibai's power being a part of these Shinjus doesn't make them as strong as Shibai, and the same goes for Ishiki's power. The same way Code himself isn't Shibai or Ishiki level, even though he has a portion of their power. The key takeaway is that it's only just a portion of that power that was divided into over 1,000 Claw Grimes that are still alive, by the way. It's similar to how Naruto's shared this chakra with the entire Shinobi Alliance in the war. It did make them significantly stronger, but they weren't exactly on Naruto's level of power. So while one can, and I'm sure a lot will, make the argument that at least Jura, the embodiment of the Ten Tails itself, is Ishiki level, that doesn't have to be the case, but it can be. Typically when it comes to shonen, the next villain is always stronger than the one that came before him, at least 97% of the time. But in this case, it doesn't have to be that way, since the characters never actually eclipse Ishiki in power, aside from Boruto Naruto that no longer exists. So the story can take a different route in regards to the power ceiling if it really wants to. Now with that in mind, which I think is almost certainly the main reason behind the power of the Shinju, what are some other possibilities? Well, one would be the likelihood that this new Ten Tails isn't really a juvenile, or at least it wasn't always a juvenile. You see, the Ten Tails has one purpose, which is to consume the energy of a planet after consuming an Otsutsuki, but it never explained what happens after that process has been completed. This is very important because the size of the Ten Tails is determined by the amount of power it holds, which is why Sasuke referred to the Ten Tails as a juvenile. It does have 10 tails, but it isn't as big as the original Ten Tails. By the way, this aspect is also reflected in the other Bijus as well. I mean, Kurama was noted to have significantly shrunken in size by the third Hokage when Minato used the Death Reaper seal to extract half of its chakra. The same thing happened when Naruto defeated the Nine Tails in Shippuden and extracted a portion of its chakra in that moment as well. Now you could also include the fact that Kurama returned as a literal infant after all of his chakra burnt out due to Barren Moon. But you could also argue that he looks like this because he was just literally reborn, so you know what, it's fine. Anyways, the point is that the extraction of power or chakra from a Biju is directly tied to the size of said Biju. We also saw that with the Ten Tails drying up and reverting to the Geto statue form after Hagoromo extracted its chakra and created the 9 Biju. And even the Ten Tails in Boruto doing the same thing after Code did something similar to create his 1000 plus claw grimes. So with that in mind, or with all of that in mind, it wouldn't surprise me if Boruto's Ten Tails did consume an Otsutsuki once before, and even absorb the power of a planet. It then went on to form chakra fruits, which is a concentration of that power, which was then consumed by the Otsutsuki who planted it. He then proceeded to do this over and over again until it didn't have any power left to create chakra fruits, which is why Jigen feeds on his remaining chakra using his Karma Seal. This then caused the Ten Tails to shrink over time, since his own chakra was being siphoned without a way for it to get replenished. So while the Ten Tails decreased in chakra quantity over time, the potency of that chakra remained, which is why Jigen thought it useful to go absorb that chakra before fighting Naruto, and also why the Shinjus created by that Ten Tails are so powerful. This makes perfect sense, by the way, because the quality of power a Ten Tails is able to gain from absorbing the life of a planet is purely dependent on the quality of life on said planet and the amount of energy the planet itself produces. So it could simply be the case that whatever planet Boruto's Ten Tails devoured simply had a larger and richer population, or maybe the planet itself was just simply bigger and generated more power, which in turn means that the quality of power it received from that planet is simply greater than what Naruto's Ten Tails took from theirs, especially since it didn't actually devour all life on the planet or the planet itself. So the writer could go this route, and it would make perfect sense since we've already seen the Ten Tails in Naruto revert forms even after becoming a divine tree, so anything is possible. Now with that said guys, let me know your thoughts down below. Do you think that the reason why the Ten Tails is as strong as it is, or at least the Shinjus created by the Ten Tails, is more so due to Code's Shibai's chakra, Shibai's Code chakra, whatever, or Shiki's essence in Code's Karma Seal? Or do you think the Ten Tails is just stronger for some abstract, abnormal reason? You know, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Just go wild, I guess. But yeah, drop a like if you like the video and subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.